Hello. Good afternoon, good morning, or good evening, depending on where you are. We are back in the booth. I've been dealing with a lot of other stuff, it's interesting hands. A lot of other stuff, family stuff outside of the booth. We are back in the booth now again. As normal, this is audiobook recording. Narrator, you are getting exactly what happens in the booth, live, unedited. You can see how it all works, or you can just listen along. Currently narrating her very own Mr. Darcy by Harriet Knowles. That's going to be book 5 in a 5-book box set of Pride and Prejudice variations, which are super cool. And that will be 1 credit for a big box set, because that's what we do. Obligatory advert, longlistenlibrary.com. You'll find loads of big box sets there for just 1 Audible credit. Right, we've done the blah. For those of you who are here for the first time, I am going to share my screen next, which will allow you to see what I see, ideally. There. Okay, I'm just going to pop myself away for a second. Actually, that's not what I wanted to do. I wanted to do that so that just in case anybody is on the live, I will be able to see, get there, anything that comes up during. Obviously, I'll leave this up for a while afterwards. I can only apologize for the... I wonder if that went up. It's always going to be. Must do something about that, so you can see the screens in my eyes. Anyway, what you should be able to see now, which you can, I was just checking what you see. You can see me in the bottom right of your screen. You will see to the left of the screen here, this is the digital audio workstation. This is what we record to. I'm using one called Reaper. Others are available. Up here, this is the region and marker manager. You can see I've got 2 projects open on the bottom window. The second one is all the character voices for this series of Pride and Prejudice variations. So if I need to go back in, I can find Mr. Bennet and it will play back Mr. Bennet's voice in my headphones, and that will be fantastic. And then I can keep Mr. Bennet sounding the same across chapters and across books. Okay, so I just did this morning. I just got chapter 1 through and out of the way and everything set up and done. So we're going to be pushing onwards with chapter 2. Like always, if you have any questions and you're live with me, please pop them in the chat box. If you have any questions or any comments or anything at all like that, please just drop a comment into the video. I leave some of them up. I don't leave all of them up. Excuse me. Burps are included. It's warts and all. I leave a few up here and there, but otherwise I'll be leaving all of the books up, and that's not really fair on the authors. Anyway, that said, this is the first session this afternoon. There'll be another session later on as well. Pretty much away we go. Okay. Chapter 2. Aunt Gardiner tucked her hand in Elizabeth's arm as they strolled along the paths. "So, did you find anything that took your attention in your uncle's library this morning? I confess I have been quite uninterested in many of the books. Is it... no, I confess I have been quite uninterested in many of the books he has been acquiring." Elizabeth smiled, concentrating on walking without limping. "Uncle Gardiner is an assiduous book collector. I see new volumes every time I visit." "Oh, yes." Aunt Gardiner was watching the path ahead. "I believe he wishes to pass on a greater estate than that of my father." She laughed. "I know my father was very proud of the way Edward has built up his fortune from almost nothing." She shook her head exasperatedly. "But he is stubborn. Nothing will prevent him in his endeavours to ensure his children are brought up proper ladies and gentlemen." "And so they are, Aunt. You can already be very proud of them." Uncle Gardiner brought. Uncle Gardiner brought little with him from Meryton. All Grandfather Gardiner's effects went to Mr. Phillips when he took over as attorney after Aunt Phillips and Mamma had their dowries. Elizabeth squeezed her aunt's arm. I am so proud of him, and you must be too. Oh, I am, very much, but I had not realized you had the measure of how much he has achieved. Aunt Gardiner smiled at her favourite niece, and as they turned the corner, Carlton House came into view. They stood admiring the sweeping mansion. But I think the outside is uh, But I think the outside is quite probably much nicer than the inside, Elizabeth said. I have heard that the Regent has decorated the inside until it is completely ornate and much too overblown. You have heard correctly, Aunt Gardiner sighed, and after a few more minutes they resumed their walk. Elizabeth wondered how to raise the topic, but her mind was still on Flora, and she was curious. How did you come to meet my uncle, Aunt Gardiner? Was your family of much superior breeding? Aunt Gardiner laughed. I think my mother affected it more than my father. She looked sideways at Elizabeth. Their fortune had come from his father, who was in trade himself. She looked inwards and laughed. He always admired Edward. Uh, he always admired Edward, and the silly man still cannot see it. Elizabeth enjoyed watching her aunt and uncle. They were so much in love, so different from her own parents. But she could ask now. What was your family name before you married, Aunt? She kept her voice light and indifferent. Powell. Her aunt her aunt didn't hesitate. Her aunt didn't hesitate. I was a Powell until I married. Oh. Elizabeth felt disappointed. But Pickering and Darcy may still be part of their family. She would just have to keep looking for the connection. She became aware her aunt was giving her a sharp look again. I am sorry, Aunt. I seem to have missed what you said again. Indeed, her aunt smiled. You have been distracted today. I wonder why that can be. Her words were light, inviting her confidences, but not demanding them. Elizabeth smiled. She did not yet feel she could say what she had found, but she knew she would not have the opportunity to go to her uncle's library alone when they got home. Ran out of breath. But she knew she would not have the opportunity to go to her uncle's library alone when they got home, or that evening. As they walked back towards the carriage in companionable silence, Elizabeth berated herself. Instead of reading more, she could have taken the diary to her bedchamber. Then she would be able to read it at night after retiring in the evening. Now she must wait until the morning and find another excuse to visit the library. She pulled her mind back to her aunt. Thank you for our walk. It has been good for us to take the air and instructive to see the local architecture. Aunt Gardiner smiled at the formality in her words. Well, you did right and ask to be permitted to visit London because you wish to better yourself, Elizabeth. I just wonder why. They sat in the carriage as it rattled back to Cheapside. Elizabeth felt sad. Aunt, I do not wish to burden you with my problems, but I have been thinking that I am unlikely to have the opportunity to marry unless I am very fortunate. Jane is older than me, and my friend Charlotte is 6 years older than me, and neither are married yet. She sighed. There are a few gentlemen of our own station who we meet. There are few, not there are a few. That sigh is happening in the wrong place. Jane is older than me, and my friend Charlotte is 6 years older than me, and neither are married yet, she sighed. There are few gentlemen of our own station who we meet, and even fewer who have the means to take a wife of no fortune. She looked her aunt in the face. If I have to make my own way in life, I do not have the education to obtain a station as a governess in a family such as yours. She took a deep breath. I must learn more so that I am able to get a reasonable position. That was a bit. She took a deep breath. I must learn more so that I am able to get a reasonable position. She smiled to make her aunt feel better. "I like children, and I would rather teach than become a companion." Aunt Gardiner looked anxious. "I do not like to confirm unhappy opinions, but I must confess I have been concerned for you and your sisters. It is most unfortunate you have not received the education you might need." She smiled reassuringly and patted Elizabeth's knee. "But you are a clever and inventive young lady, and I think you have an excellent plan. We will help you all we can." Burp. Excuse me. Elizabeth blinked away the moisture in her eyes. She felt gratitude to her aunt for her help, but she did not want pity. Most certainly she did not want pity. Over tea, when they were home, and while she was hearing all the stories of the day from the little girls, she decided to write to Jane that evening. If she could not read Flora's story, she would write to Jane. "Dearest Jane, how are you? My time here passes very pleasurably. Aunt and uncle are kindness itself, and the children are growing up fast. Today, Aunt Gardiner and I went to St. James's Park and saw Carlton House. It was interesting. Interesting. It was interesting. It was interesting. In the mornings I have been exploring Uncle Gardiner's library, but it seems there is not a lot there that will help me learn what I need to know to be a governess. I am relying on you, Jane, to marry well, and then you will, out of kindness, employ me as a governess, and I will have to take the children to school each day to make up for my abominable teaching." She looked at what she had written and thought it would make Jane smile, but she could not smile while writing the letter. Meryton was so deficient in marriageable gentlemen. Perhaps she should invite Jane here, although, as it was not the season, there were few balls. "Perhaps you should come to London and find a rich gentleman here. I do not think you will find one in Meryton who is able to provide the comfort—" Running out of air again. "I do not think you will find one in Meryton who is able to provide the comforts you deserve, my dearest Jane." Elizabeth rolled over on her bed and laced her fingers behind her head. The diary had many pages, and she had seen that Flora had written on nearly all. She needed to know who Flora was. She needed to know that Mr. Darcy was a kind gentleman who had not abused his wife. She shook her head. She should not be concerned about people from the past, people she did not know, people whose lives were completely removed from hers. She couldn't do anything to help them. In fact, it was very possible the book had been hidden a long time ago. Flora might not even still be living. Elizabeth felt a pain in her heart at the thought that Flora might be dead, and her brow wrinkled. Why did she feel this sense of sorrow for a girl she had never known, this sense of kinship? She shook her head. She would bring the diary up here. She would read it and try to find out who she was or had been, but she must not become attached to it or involved with Flora and her life in the past. She made herself think of her plan, the reason she was here. French. She must learn French, but it was not something she could learn all about from a book. She must find a French person and practice talking and listening to someone who could assist her with her accent. Stop. We turn that into a chapter. We tell it that it is chapter 2, and on we go. Sorry, just save it, just in case anything awful happens. I'm sure it won't. Quick sip of cranberry juice, the delightful cranberry juice, which is acidic and promotes saliva, which makes less mouth noise, which makes my gorgeous editor very happy. Okay, here we go again. Chapter 3. The great cathedral loomed behind Elizabeth as she walked across the small public gardens the following week. She smiled as she saw the young woman pushing the perambulator a small boy sitting up ramrod straight, looking out, and a rather older little girl trotting along beside them. A manservant followed leisurely behind the governess and children, and the other woman smiled at her and turned towards the bench where Elizabeth was about to sit down. Okay, we have, if anybody is interested, you always read the book first. There are my notes for the book for any characters that turn up. This particular lady is Mademoiselle Marnier. She is the same age as Lizzie. She is a French governess. So if she's the same age as Lizzie, we'll start with Lizzie's voice, and then we will take it a little bit French, but not too much, like this. So there is a little. This kind of French accent is not a real French accent. This is much more the way we would expect a French person to sound in a novel like this. We're fulfilling expectations. People should sound like you expect them to sound, unless it's deliberately mentioned in the text that they don't. Okay, so and we've got a bit of back and forth. So we'll start with Lizzie's voice, and then we will make it a little bit French. Okay. Bonjour, mademoiselle, she said lightly, and the small girl came to Elizabeth's side, staring at her solemnly. Bonjour, mademoiselle Marnier. Elizabeth, now that went a bit cockney. Elizabeth's side, staring at her solemnly. Bonjour, mademoiselle Marnier. Elizabeth was pleased to see them again. She bent to the little girl. Bonjour, bonjour. To see them again, she bent to the little girl. Bonjour, ma petite. Ma petite, the other lady corrected Elizabeth's pronunciation. To see them again, she bent to the little girl. Bonjour, ma petite. Ma petite, the other lady corrected Elizabeth's pronunciation. Ma petite, Elizabeth repeated. Très bon. Mademoiselle Marnier turned to the small boy in the perambulator and carefully lifted him out, straightening his collar and setting him on his sturdy little... On his doesn't work. And setting him on his sturdy little legs. The little girl took his hand and he toddled off with his sister across the closely cut grass. Okay, hold on, I've also got a burp coming. Okay. And setting him on his sturdy little legs. The little girl took his hand and he toddled off with his sister across the closely cut grass. Still burping. With his sister. Jump in there. And he toddled off with his sister across the closely cut grass. Both ladies watched them absently before Elizabeth bent to her reticule. She tugged a pencil and a piece of paper out of the small bag and picked up a textbook from the bench beside her. Thank you so much for coming again. I really am. I am really, not I really am. Thank you so much for coming again. I am really grateful that you are helping me get the pronunciation right when I try to speak French. She smiled at the woman, about the same age as she, but already in service, and in a foreign country, too. Je vous en prie. Mademoiselle Marnier shrugged. It is interesting to talk to you, and I can improve my English also. Of course. Elizabeth was eager to help. She knew it would be many months before she could hope to say she was fluent in French. She opened the book at the page she was studying. Here, I do not understand what the different names are for these. The illustrations all look the same. Mademoiselle Marnier took the book and looked at it carefully. Here, Miss... Here. Mademoiselle Marnier took the book and looked at it carefully. Here, Mademoiselle Elizabeth. It is referring to the different styles of the chairs. We talk about many different types, where in English the word chair means all of them. A howl from the small boy, and she jumped to her feet. Elizabeth watched as she hurried over and picked him up and brushed him down. It was not ideal, and she felt rather sorry for the children, especially the little girl, as she was scolded for her neglect of the toddler. But Elizabeth did not know any other way of learning French, so she must harden her heart a little. It was good for the children to be out in the park, she told herself, although she knew that Jane would be horrified and would sit and play with them. Elizabeth made a face. Tomorrow she would bring something the children could play with while she talked to their governess. Mademoiselle Marnier returned to the bench and was soon concentrating on the book again. Elizabeth glanced up occasionally to check on the children, and she knew the footman was also there near the gate. Occasional sounds of passing horses or coaches, even sometimes voices of people, floated in from the road beside the park, but the park itself remained deserted. Deserted, not deserted. But the park itself remained deserted. The thought of Flora came to Elizabeth's mind. She had now secreted the red diary in her bedchamber. She had now secreted the red diary in her bedchamber, in the closet, and was getting to know the girl as she nervously began her preparations for her marriage to a man nearly 30 years her senior. What would that be like, Elizabeth wondered. Mademoiselle Elizabeth? She heard the puzzled voice of the girl beside her. Oh, I am sorry. Something took my attention. Please tell me again. 21, the girl said. It is a card game that we play in France. She brushed away a fly that was irritating her. If you wish to be a governess, one of the things you will have to teach will be the numbers. I suggest you learn the numbers very well. She began to recite them more slowly than she had been. Elizabeth began to recite them with her, and they laughed together. She glanced up and saw a gentleman sitting on a large black horse on the road by the gateway of the park. He was staring in at them, and she felt uncomfortable. His gaze moved to the children, sitting quietly on the grass, and then back to the two ladies on the bench. His hair was dark, and his scowling expression matched his tall black hat, black attire, and dark eyes. Itchy beard. Itchy beardlets. Elizabeth felt a shock jolt through her, and that alerted. Elizabeth felt a shock jolt through her, and that alerted Mademoiselle Marnier, who glanced up and jumped to her feet. We must go. She hurried over to the children. Master Richard, Miss Amelia, it is time to go home. Oh, you should not be sitting on the grass. Your clothes will be stained. Elizabeth slowly got to her feet. Was the gentleman the children's father? Why did he look so angry? But she knew the answer to the last question, at least. Aunt and Uncle Gardiner would have been angry if they had discovered their children were being neglected by a servant, because that servant was chatting to a stranger. She felt guilty and went over to the French girl, taking the perambulator to her. As the girl settled the small boy into it, Elizabeth spoke in a low voice. Is he their father? Will you get into trouble? Mademoiselle Marnier looked frightened. No, I do not know. He is a relation. I do not know if he will tell my mistress. She turned away, little Amelia clinging to her skirts. Goodbye, Mademoiselle Elizabeth. Keep practicing your French. Do not be anxious about me. I hope there is no trouble. Elizabeth hurried alongside her. Do you want me to come with you as you walk past him? No, it is better if you stay here. Mademoiselle Marnier hurried a little more, and Elizabeth let her draw ahead before turning back to the bench where her textbook lay dropped on the ground and her reticule sat waiting for her. But the back of her neck prickled under her bonnet, and she turned to see the man on the horse was gazing at her enigmatically. Oh, ran out of breath. And she turned to see the man on the horse was gazing at her enigmatically, not watching the governess as she hurried off down the road towards St. James's. Elizabeth stared back at the man. How could he look at her like that? It was not at all gentlemanlike. Then she dropped her gaze. It certainly was not ladylike to stare at him either. She turned away and fussed with replacing her pencil and paper into her reticule and pulling the drawstring tighter. It did not stop the image of the gentleman in her mind, though, and she shivered a little as she remembered how handsome he was. He had better not inform on the governess. If he got her sacked, it would be Elizabeth's fault. She was angry with him at the thought of what had happened. Why did he stop and stare and frighten Mademoiselle Marnier like that? She crouched to pick up the textbook and wondered how she could just walk past him as she left the park. But she took a deep breath and glanced up at the great dome of St. Paul's Cathedral as it towered over her. She felt stronger for it and turned to leave. He was gone. She hadn't even heard the sound of hooves over the general road noise. Elizabeth made a face to herself. She felt deflated, sad. But no, she should be feeling relieved that he was gone, and she scolded herself. Going through the gate, she turned away from the St. James's district and towards the less fashionable Cheapside. But his face was etched in her mind. She wondered who he was. Okay, again, turn that into a chapter. It's chapter 3. Chapter 3, name that bad boy. Save all projects. We don't need to record her again because she doesn't turn up again. I don't believe. In fact, I'm sure she doesn't. Okay, and she's not canon. In as much as canon happens in these things. It doesn't. You know what I mean. Okay, onwards. Chapter 4. Darcy had his expression under better control now as he turned into Brook Street and headed to Darcy House. Who was the stranger who had been laughing with the children's governess? And why was he even still thinking about her? He had been riding past the small park behind the cathedral. It's not a word. He had been riding past... Oh, no, jumped in on my own cue there. He had been riding past the small park behind the cathedral on his way home for lunch when he had spotted 2 small children who looked like Richards. He thought at first they were on their own, sitting in the middle, pulling at the blades of grass. Then he had seen the governess was over on one of the benches, not paying any attention at all to her charges. But... The manservant was watching for their safety at least, but that was not the point. Darcy had pulled up and scowled while he waited to see how long it would be before he was noticed. It was only a few minutes before the other young woman glanced up at the children and then noticed him. It was when their eyes met that he had felt a shock of recognition jolt through him, leaving him almost breathless. But he knew he had never seen her in his... Hold on. Stand up, jump down. Here we go. But he knew he had never seen her in his life before. She had been laughing, and he wanted to hear the sound of her laugh and see it again. But as soon as she'd seen him, she had sobered and assisted the governess, tried to reassure her, judging by her manner. He thought she possibly felt guilty at distracting the woman's attention, but then he realized she was there alone after the servants had left with the children. She did not even have a maid with her. He dared not stay, even though he wanted to commit her face to his memory. He turned the horse and trotted away. How stupid he had been! But within a very few minutes he turned the horse and put himself on the other side of the road so that he was half hidden from sight from those who might be in the park. He walked the animals slowly back along the road, watching for her. But she hadn't been on the road, and she had not remained in the park either. He walked on to the end of the road before turning again and retracing his steps along Carter Lane. He was disturbed. There was no sign of her. Perhaps she had slipped down one of the side lanes. She certainly would not be living in the St. James area. A young lady from there would never be without a maid and a manservant, maybe two. He must forget her, and he turned for home. Georgiana would be waiting to join him for lunch. But the young woman was in his thoughts as he crossed Paternoster Square and headed home, his horse shaking its head and wanting a free rein. He spurred it to a trot. He would be home in 20 minutes. He found himself wanting to turn and head for his cousin's home. But he told himself he would go there later and tell Richard and Lady Rosamond what he had seen. Such a governess was not fit to be in charge of the children. But he wondered how he could get to speak to her, find out who she should... That was not good. And that means we've dropped here. Let's find that. That was the last chapter. I don't know why it does that sometimes. There we go. There we go. We come over here. Such a governess was not fit to be in charge of the children. But he wondered how he could get to speak to her, find out... Yeah, that's where I went wrong. Okay. Was not fit to be in charge of the children. But he wondered how he could get to speak to her, find out who she had been with. No, it's still rough. Use your articulators. But he wondered how he could get to speak to her, find out who she had been with. That was important. He grimaced. But it would be most imprudent. His cousin would undoubtedly make his own interpretation. No, he could not do that. He dismounted at the foot of the steps as a groom ran to take the horse. Then he climbed the steps thoughtfully. A young lady would not go out without a maid. Perhaps this girl was a servant herself. If that was the case, he must not search her out. He gave his hat and gloves to his valet and headed for his library. He would have time for a whisky before lunch. He sloshed a good measure into a glass and walked to the window to look out into the garden. After a few moments, he smiled slightly. The garden was large, almost the size of the park he had seen her in. Seen her in. The garden was large, almost the size of the park he had seen her in. He wondered idly why the governess had taken the children there. Their own garden was almost as large as his, and their coach could have taken them to any of the great parks in town. The strange girl had hair as dark as his own, a few small ringlets escaping from under her bonnet. Her face had lit up as she had laughed, her expression luminous. He shook his head and turned back to the big leather chairs. He put his glass down and picked up the sheaf of post as he sat down, idly flicking through the letters. There was one with Bingley's illegible scrawl, and he chuckled, putting the rest aside. "Darcy, I hope this letter finds you well and able to assist me in a small matter. I would value your advice. As you know, I must settle somewhere soon, and I would like to have some time in the country before the season calls us to remain in London. I have received information about an estate available to rent immediately. It is cannot. Okay, we'll pick that up there. About an estate available to rent immediately. It cannot be compared to Pemberley, of course, but I believe it is adequate. However, I wonder if you would be able to ride down there with me to give me your opinion before I close the arrangement. Might we say Thursday next?" Darcy smiled and threw the letter onto the table. Bingley's writing was as scattered and as untidy as ever, and he had forgotten. And he had forgotten to say where the estate in question was situated or what it was called. It would be useful to know, so he could make some inquiries as to its suitability before wasting a day, or more, looking at an unsuitable pile of stones. He sighed and finished his drink. He heaved himself to his feet and went to his writing desk. Scribbling a hasty note to Bingley, he rang the bell and gave the note to the footman. "Have this delivered at once to Mr. Bingley, if you please." The man bowed away, and Darcy went through to the drawing-room, where he knew Georgiana would be waiting for him. She rose to her feet to curtsy, and he bowed politely. She was turning into a very lovely young woman, but he could still see the sadness and loneliness in her eyes. He went to her and kissed her hand. "How has your morning been, dear sister? Have you been practicing the pianoforte?" "Yes, William. I have occupied my time while you have been—" Have you been practicing the pianoforte? Yes, William. I have... No, we need to get rid of that. Yes, William. It's not quite right. Sister, have you been practicing the pianoforte? Yes, William. I have occupied my time while you have been out. But her voice was flat and colourless. He looked at her. She was still pale and quiet. He grimaced. It was only a few weeks since he had brought her back from Ramsgate, and she had not yet accepted his declaration that she would never see Mr. Wickham again. He extended his arm. "Let us have some lunch." She needed friends, he knew that, but he had not the slightest idea who would be suitable. He only knew that the insincerity of Miss Bingley would not be right for her. Miss Bingley cared nothing for Georgiana or her happiness. She only wished to be friendly with her, to try to impress him. He saw Georgiana was looking with a puzzled expression. "What is the matter, William?" He shook his head. "It is nothing, Georgiana. I am merely wondering whether you might appreciate better company than I am at the present time." Her smile vanished. "What are you thinking of, brother?" She sounded suddenly nervous. "I do not know, Georgiana. If you have any ideas, perhaps you would be good enough to let me know." Her head dropped. "Yes, I will do that, William." For a brief instant he imagined her with a companion here at Darcy House, and at Pemberley, a companion who was good, who was a good. Here at Darcy House, and at Pemberley. A companion who was a good friend to her, who was full of life and excitement, who would make Georgiana happy. He could not recall when he had seen her happy recently. A dark-haired, laughing face flickered across his vision. He pushed it away with an effort, determined to let no trace of it remain on his features for his sister to wonder at. Turn it into a chapter. Yeah. Chapter 4. Save it off, and away we go again. Chapter 5. Darcy waited impatiently for several hours after lunch until it was a more convenient moment to call on his cousin. Finally, he judged it suitable, or nearly so, and called for a horse. As he donned hat and gloves... Ooh, try and say the word gloves right. As he donned hat and gloves, he glanced at Georgiana and Mrs. Annesley. "Might I ask how you intend to occupy yourself this afternoon, Georgiana?" She glanced at her new companion, staid and comfortable. "Mrs. Annesley has suggested we do some sketching in the garden while the weather is suitable." He thought she did not look particularly enthusiastic, but he nodded. "That seems to be a good idea. I will be interested to see your sketches when I return." He must try to assist her in getting used to her new companion. It could not be easy for either of them. But Mrs. Young had been expelled from their presence as soon as he knew that she had arranged the whole Rams... Is it debacle or debacle? I never remember. So, let us go to... Not that. I don't need that. What I need is a bit of the old Safari. And then we go... Definition. It's one of those words that I just never remember. It's like now that's very good, but that's the French. English is what I want. English. And that will tell me how to pronounce it. Here, this is called IPA. These are the bits in the dictionary that look like gobbledygook, but aren't. Debacle. De debacle. Okay, so debacle. That little, um, the little, apostrophe up there means that the bit after it is the stressed bit, so it's debacle, debacle. Okay, I could listen to it if I wanted to as well. No, it doesn't come out anyway, but it's debacle. I can see that by looking at it. So that's great. We come back to here then. Actually, that's got to come in front of that so that I can see if anybody happens to message. Okay, right. Back to here. Let's just make sure where we are. Okay. Let's chop in there. But Mrs. Young had been expelled from their presence as soon as he knew that she had arranged the whole Ramsgate debacle with Wickham. Darcy. Okay. Darcy turned and strode down the steps to the groom holding the horse for him. It seemed to him to be new, and he walked all around it. All round it, not all around it. It seemed to him to be new, and he walked all round it, admiring the lines of its admiring. Use the language. It seemed to him to be new, and he walked all round it, admiring the lines of its shoulders and flanks. A nice-looking animal. How long since he has been here? The groom touched his cap. Mr. Robinson purchased him Mr. Robinson purchased him at Tattersall's last month. Slow down, and make him a bit more manly. Mr. Robinson purchased him at Tattersall's last month, sir. He is a nice, even-tempered bride, although he can be lively. Good. Darcy was pleased. His head groom knew he liked to keep an eye out for handsome animals, and some of the newer thoroughbreds suited him very well. The groom assisted him to mount, and he circled a few times to get the measure of the horse's mettle. What is his name? Baron, sir. Darcy could not help chuckling. Very apt. He turned the animal away and headed towards Temple Lane, walking because he didn't want to get there too early. He was happy his cousin lived so close while in London, even if it was rather too east to be very fashionable. But cousin Richard had no fortune, being the younger son of the Earl, and he had made a love match for his marriage. Lady Rosamond was the Lady Rosamond was the daughter of the Earl of Crannock, and benefited from a reasonable fortune, although her father had not been pleased when the then Colonel Fitzwilliam had called on him to ask for his daughter's hand in marriage. But Darcy had assisted Richard to buy out of his commission, and was very glad to do so. He did not want to lose his cousin to Napoleon's army. War of some sort seemed never-ending. As the road cleared, he let Baron trot to ease his high spirits, and smiled as he thought of his cousin. He was helping Richard build his investments so the family could become more secure as each year passed. He pulled his mind away from those thoughts, and wondered how he was going to be able to speak to the governess about the young woman she had been with this morning. Of course, of itself it would not be difficult, but he had not the least idea how to do it with a use your words. But he had not the least idea how to do it without raising suspicions in his cousin's mind, and that he did not wish to do. He still had no idea when he reined the horse in outside the elegant townhouse in Middle Temple Lane. A groom ran to take the horse, and he climbed the steps, nodding at the butler. Good afternoon. Is Mr. Fitzwilliam at home this afternoon? Right, now this is another butler. Let's just make sure. That's the butler at Darcy, London. I've also got Darcy Stewart. Let us see if I can pull another butler. Oh, that's the Matlock House butler. That'll work perfectly. Wait here, madam. Very good. Is Mr. Fitzwilliam at home this afternoon? If you would wait a moment, Mr. Darcy, I will inquire. The butler nodded at the footman, and Darcy handed over his hat, gloves, and cane. a nice little touch, which assured him of the butler's confidence in his admittance. "Darcy!" His cousin hurried into the hall. "I am delighted to see you. Come through to the drawing-room." "Thank you, Richard." Darcy followed his great friend through to the formal room and bowed to Richard's wife. "Good afternoon, Lady Rosamond." Now, Lady Rosamond, she has married in. What have I got on my notes? Lady Rosamond, daughter of the Earl of Cranach and Richard's wife. That's all we know. She will have an RP accent. Essentially, she will probably sound not that different to Lady... What's it? His mother. Let's have a look. Lady Matlock's here. Truly, it is not the Earl. Truly, it is not. Yes, absolutely. So she's similar, but not the same as that. Okay. To Richard's wife. Good afternoon, Lady Rosamond. It is a pleasure to see you, Mr. Darcy. Let me send for refreshments. Okay, and we're just going to grab that because she does have things to say later on, I believe. So we go, and I'm going to register her as a character. Lady Rosamond. And now you'll see if I go across to character voices. My most recent character voice here is Lady Rosamond. There she is. So she is preserved for posterity. Very good. It is a pleasure to see you, Mr. Darcy. Let me send for refreshments. Darcy bowed his assent and sank into the chair she indicated to him. He knew there would be a few moments of general conversation, and then his cousin would ask him the reason for his unexpected visit. He still did not know what to say, and he worried over it in his mind. Finally, Richard put down his cup and saucer. "You are distracted today, Darcy. Perhaps you would like to say why you have called on us, or would you like to come through to the library?" Darcy shook his head. "Thank you, no. What I have to ask will concern Lady Rosamond, too." He thought for a moment. "Forgive me. I'm. Forgive me. I am not sure how to raise the subject." He saw his cousin's eyebrows rise and berated himself. He was certainly ruining this. He sat forwards in the chair. "I was out riding this morning, and I saw your children out with their governess." He smiled at Lady Rosamond. "They are lovely children, and so well behaved." "Thank you." Lady Rosamond seemed quite composed, but he sensed her interest had sharpened. She knew he was not there just for this compliment. His cousin had also leaned forward, his expression quizzical. "The governess seemed very young," Darcy commented. "Has she been in your employ long?" "A few months." Lady Rosamond handed him a fresh cup of tea. "My older sister took on her sister as a governess and suggested that this girl might like to come here. They are of a very good family, and, of course, France is not a good place to be at the moment." "I did not know she was French." Darcy sipped the tea. "I do not know if the children are really ready for a governess rather than a nursemaid." Yeah. "But it will be helpful if they can gain a good French accent while they are young." She sat back. That's still her. Yeah, that's still her. Just make sure who's talking. "Surely Napoleon will be gone soon, and we can travel in Europe once more." She smiled at her husband, who nodded. "I do not think it will be all that soon, but it is as well to prepare the children." Richard was a father who was determined to do the right thing for his family. "I agree." Darcy put his cup down and took a deep breath. "When I saw them this morning, she was talking to a young lady. Would you permit me to ask if she knows who that lady is?" Lady Rosamond put down her cup. Lady Rosamond put down her cup and looked at him, startled. That should be a little bit quicker as a cue. "Would you permit me to ask if she knows who that lady is?" Lady Rosamond put down her cup and looked at him, startled. Then she looked at her husband. Richard looked puzzled. Was she not attending to the children? Darcy wanted to be diplomatic. This governess was his only link to the laughing young woman, and he wanted to be able to find her. He would not let himself consider why. I only observed them for a few minutes before she brought them away. Richard stood up. Come into my library, Darcy. I have some very fine Scotch I would like to share. He turned to his wife. Rosamond, my dear, would you be able to go upstairs and see what you can find out for Darcy? In the library, Darcy stood at the window with his back to his cousin. Richard laughed. You are embarrassed, Darcy. I can see it, and I do not even need to ask the question. Then pray do not. Darcy could feel the back of his neck getting warm, and hoped his cousin would not see the flush he knew had stained his skin dark. But the quiet chuckle dashed his hopes, and he scowled. Do not be angry with me, Darcy. I am delighted you are at last seeming to be human. I hope the lady is worthy of your attention. Mr. Darcy shrugged. I do not know why I'm a... I do not know why I'm pursuing this, so I do not see how you do. His cousin was silent for a moment, and Darcy was much relieved. Okay, make it a chapter. Save it all off. We go again. Chapter 6. Elizabeth sat on her bed and opened the diary. She was happy she had brought the diary into her bedchamber so she could read it each evening. She had begun to feel as if she knew Flora as well as her younger sisters. And this is the point where the character voices come in. I voiced Flora in Chapter 1. I don't immediately recall exactly how I did it, so we go back to here. Excuse me, I've got a yawn, I think. Flora is here. My name is Flora, and I will be 16 in... My name is Flora Pickering, and I will be 16 in 2 weeks' time. There we go, that's where she is. Mr. Darcy called again today. It is only a week until our marriage, and I am getting very nervous. He has been telling me about his estate in Derbyshire. It is called Pemberley, and I understand it is a very great estate. I hope I can I hope I can learn to be a good mistress of the estate. I would not like it if I let him down. Mr. Darcy is buying a small home near here for my mother and sisters. He offered a place near Pemberley for them to live, but they have chosen to stay here near their friends. He apologised to me, saying he had thought that they would be good company for me if they were in Derbyshire. But at least he is making provision for them. That is the whole object of our marriage. I am still angry with Christopher, though, for making me do this. Mr. Darcy is very quiet and stern. It is, I suppose, understandable, because he has not long lost his wife and children. I must admit I am frightened, because it is quite clear that I am I must admit I am frightened, because it is quite clear that I am to produce an heir for the estate, and if his wife died in childbirth, then I might too. But she might have died because of something else. I cannot ask him. I keep telling myself lots of people have babies and survive, and also that it will be nice never to have to worry about money again. I will not let him think I'm frightened. I am frightened. Read the words. Nice never to have to worry about money again. I will not let him think I am frightened. Mr. Darcy is very handsome. His hair is as dark as mine, and when he looks at me he has an intense expression in his eyes, which seem almost black. He is really tall and wears very dashing clothes. At least, to me they seem dashing. He is calling again tomorrow, and I believe we will be able to walk in the garden. I must think of something to ask him so that I can find out what his interests are. I would not like to be boring, and I do hope that he will be able to feel affection for me. I cannot tell anyone this, but I am already a fair way to being in love with him. That seems silly, because I have only met him a few times this last week, but I feel so sorry for him with his loss. He seems to have no one he can talk to. I believe his own mother died in childbirth, and he was raised by servants. I do not intend that our children will have such a cold upbringing. Mr. Darcy has provided me with a very generous allowance, and I have been getting ready a trousseau to take with me to Pemberley." Elizabeth smiled and closed the book. She wished she had known Flora, because she wanted to give her a big hug. She could remember when she was 16 and, looking back, knew how young and naive she had been. From what she had just read, she thought Flora was as dark-haired as she herself was, and her description of Mr. Darcy, well, she could almost swoon at the very tall, dark man with eyes that were deep pools of intense expression. She bit her lip. She was startled to realize she was imagining the tall gentleman on the black horse at the park gate that morning. Gentleman. I missed my L. She was startled to realize she was imagining the tall gentleman on the black horse at the park gate that morning. She closed the book. It would never do. She was trying to convince herself that Flora and her Mr. Darcy were merely characters from the long-ago past. They were not real today. It would not help if she put a face to Mr. Darcy and imagined she herself looked like Flora. Slowly she washed and changed into her night shift. Climbing into bed, she reached for the diary again. Something drew her irresistibly to the story. "Mr. Darcy was very polite today when he came, but he disapproved of some of the shoes I had bought, and had Mr. Darcy was very polite today when he came, but he disapproved of some of the shoes I had bought, and has ordered that I return them in exchange for some which are more suitable. I am not sure how to go about this, but I did not dare say that to him. He seemed very stern and proud today, but the maid he has appointed to attend me seems very experienced, and I shall take her with me tomorrow. I hope I can buy the right shoes. I think he saw that I was anxious about it, because when he said farewell to me, he lifted my hand. Yeah. He lifted my hand to his lips and held it there for what seemed like a long time. I cannot say how much it affected me. My heart was racing so fast at his touch. And then he smiled at me, and I felt as if he understood. I will not see him tomorrow. He has an appointment in London to obtain the special license for our marriage." Elizabeth shivered. She was almost as excited for this wedding as if it had been her own. She put the diary down and extinguished the candle. As she pulled the covers snugly around herself, she imagined if it had been less than a week to her own wedding day. She knew Flora would not be sleeping when it was so few days to the beginning of her new life. She wondered why Mr. Darcy had been cold and proud that day, and then thought perhaps he was feeling some guilt at taking a new wife when his first wife was dead. She frowned, trying to remember. Had Flora said how long he had been a widower? She could not recall it, and she was far too comfortable now to think about getting out and relighting the candle. Breathe. Her bed and bedchamber here in Gracechurch Street were as familiar and comfortable. Her bed and bedchamber here in Gracechurch Street were as familiar and comfortable to her as Longbourn. No, don't put that pause in there. It doesn't belong there. Her bed and bedchamber here in Gracechurch Street were as familiar and comfortable. Come on. Her bed and bedchamber here in Gracechurch Street were as familiar and comfortable to her as Longbourn, and she sighed contentedly. She woke suddenly in the night, knowing she had been dreaming. The imprint of his lips on her hand was so real, she held the back of her hand to her own mouth. She had been in the park again, but this time he had ridden in and dismounted. She couldn't recall whether he had called her Miss Elizabeth or Miss Flora, but she had spoken to him. Mr. Darcy, and he had looked at her with the burning intensity Flora had written about. Elizabeth pushed herself upright to sit on the edge of her bed and drew her shawl up around her shoulders. She would have to wait until her heart slowed back to its normal rhythm. Normal rhythm. Use your L's. She would have to wait until her heart not stopped. That would be awful. She would have to wait until her heart slowed back to its normal rhythm before she could even think of sleep again. Why had the stranger affected her so? He was just a passing stranger who had scowled into the park. She did not even know his name. He couldn't possibly be Mr. Darcy. Flora's Mr. Darcy was very much older than this stranger, even on the day she had written about him in her diary. The dark man from the park was a stranger, she told herself firmly. Elizabeth was determined to marry for affection, and that could not happen suddenly across a distance. She shivered and lay back down, pulling the cover over her again. That was a sloppy. She shivered and lay back down, pulling the cover over her again. It was, and that's still sloppy. She shivered and lay back down, pulling the cover over her again. It was a foolish dream, and she must forget him in the same way as the countless strangers who passed across her sight. Did it across there? My father-in-law's accent. Get that. It was a foolish dream, and she must forget him in the same way as the countless strangers of... Come on. It was a foolish dream, and she must forget him in the same way as the countless strangers who passed across her sight. Perhaps she should put Flora's diary back where she had found it and read no further. But even as she thought it, she knew she could not do that. She needed to find out whether Flora had been happy. She needed to know what had happened to her and try to find her family. Burps, excuse me. Perhaps they knew of the existence of the book and were looking for it. She shook her head. No, the way it had been hidden seemed to say that Flora did not want it found. Elizabeth had been indignant on Flora's behalf when she had read that her mother and sisters had decided to stay in their hometown and not move to Derbyshire to be near her when she married. After all, she had made the ultimate sacrifice to wed Mr. After all, she had made the ultimate sacrifice to wed Mr. Darcy to secure their future, and he was perching... come on. After all, she had made the ultimate sacrifice to wed Mr. Darcy to secure their future, and he was purchasing the property for them. She turned over, trying to feel ready for sleep again. But Flora might have been better off without her family. They did not deserve such a person as Flora. Elizabeth shook her head. She would certainly not marry just because she was ordered to for the benefit of others. But Flora had lived long ago. There could have been little choice for her. She was happy that Flora seemed to be developing feelings for Mr. Darcy, and he seemed gentlemanly enough. As sleep overtook her again, it was the serious face of the tall, handsome stranger who filled her vision. She wondered who he was. And again... and we'll save it off. Save all projects, okay. While we're here, I just want to have a little look at how many words this is, because I can't remember. Let's just how I work out. I see what's going on there. I might have to just move it to the side. This is one word. Command 8. 89k. So we budget generally for 9,300 words for an hour, about. So it's 89, call it 90,000. So it's going to be under 10 hours then, this book. Not a lot, but under 10 hours. Just is good to know. So I can, excuse me. So that I can pace myself. I'm feeling a little bit of grumbliness in the throat there, so I just need to be aware of that and monitor it carefully. Okay. On we go. It's very warm in here today. Chapter 7. Darcy woke the next morning feeling irritable. Another night with his dreams full of the young woman named Elizabeth. At least he now knew her given name, but that was all the governess had known. He was bitterly disappointed that she had not known anything about... He was bitterly disappointed that she had not known anything else about the girl, even where she lived. Lady Rosamond had been very good. He had reluctantly accepted that. She had spoken to the French girl, who had been afraid and tearful. Darcy had been grateful. Richard's wife must have been very tempted to dismiss her summarily, and she was not used to trying to understand the feelings of servants. But she had taken the time to encourage her to talk, and Darcy appreciated it. The girl Elizabeth was a gentlewoman. The girl Elizabeth was a gentlewoman. The governess was sure of that. She had told her she wished to learn French because she would be without fortune on the death of her father, and she might need to enter service. Darcy's heart twisted at the thought that she might be in difficulty, and he would have no means of finding her. But his cold reasoning told him he was well out of the risks of such a liaison. He climbed out of bed, rubbing his face with his hands. He must rise now and deal with his correspondence early. By late morning he would be riding out near St. Paul's Cathedral. He would not see her, he was sure of that. He thought she knew that she might be... He thought she knew that she might have been the cause of trouble for the governess, and she would not risk being caught in the same area again. But he could not stay away. She had been there in the late morning, and he would not allow a day to go by when he was not there until he was certain of her continued absence. She had not been there yesterday, but it might be that she was needed by her relations. The young Frenchwoman had told Lady Rosamond that the girl Elizabeth had confided to her that she was up from the country, staying with relations while she tried to... Staying with relations while she tried to better herself to gain a higher position. He smiled reluctantly. Her determination pleased him. She wanted something better out of life, and she was prepared to do what was necessary to obtain it, rather than just complain and expect someone to procure it for her. But the smile left his face. He had no idea how she could be found. Once she returned home, she could be anywhere in the country. She would be lost to him forever. Darcy rode up and down Carter Lane before turning away and circling the cathedral until those who had been there would have gone elsewhere. Then he returned and patrolled the street again, gazing into the park each time. After an hour or a little more, he reined Baron in and patted his neck. "Let's go for some exercise." This was madness. He would not find her in this way. He would go to Rotten Row and trot up and down to give the horse a good workout. Then he decided he would not enjoy the need to stop often and return the greetings of the socialites who would be so delighted to see you here, Mr. Darcy. He ground his teeth. Usually he rode out early when it was permitted to gallop and enjoy the speed and fresh air without the trouble of others to disturb him. But he had to go somewhere, and it was too soon to return home. He acknowledged the truth that kept him away. him away. He acknowledged the truth that kept him away. He could find nothing to talk about to his sister as yet. Scowling, he turned for one of the less fashionable parks. He would be able to let the horse have its head on Hampstead Heath, and he would have time to think while he was making his way there, too. He could give himself stern directions while riding, and he took the opportunity to do so. This is a young woman of inferior birth. I am mad to be looking for her. Look for her I must. I must find out what feelings I have for her. He reined in when a group of men pushed past across the road, shouting bawdy comments at a young girl in a doorway. She smiled provocatively at them and waved. Darcy felt sickened at the need that must make her sell herself. He must find Elizabeth, he must. But why is she important to me? It is but momentary lust, a desire that makes no sense. And so he argued with himself all the way to Hampstead. His head told him he must not try to find her. His heart blindly insisted he must. Getting a bit gloopy in the mouth. Okay. He turned onto the heath and shook his thoughts away. A good gallop was just what both horse and man needed, and he set the animal along the almost deserted path. All cares and concerns put aside, Darcy plunged along the open grassland, the dust flying behind him, the horse snorting with passion. Faster and faster. Let me forget her. Faster still. I must find her, see how she could ensnare me so. Finally, Darcy pulled up and sat, breathing heavily as Baron tossed his head, sending the foam from his mouth flying out in thin streams. Slowly he shook himself and turned the horse before it could get too chilled, and began to walk him home. The next day he was going to view that estate with Bingley in Hertfordshire. Part of him was anxious that he might miss seeing Elizabeth in town, but a larger part of him knew that he stood almost no prospect of ever seeing her by chance. London was a big city. He could not ask his cousin to instruct the French governess to go back to the park and try to locate Elizabeth for him. He was embarrassed enough that Richard felt him already in love, or more likely in lust. He would not expose himself to the He would not expose himself to the possibility himself. He would not expose himself to the possibility of ridicule again. He would push aside the thoughts of her laughing face, He would push aside the thoughts of her laughing face, the youthful enjoyment of life, No, he must not think of her. Such brief infatuation would go equally as fast if he were but determined enough. He must be determined. Excuse me. He had heard sentimental fools talk about love at first sight, and he deemed it impossible. Those who believed it were fools. Fools! He spurred the horse to a trot. He must get home and keep busy. Okay. There we are. It's just before 3. Okay. We get another one, possibly another 2. Let's see how we go. Chapter 8. Keeping busy had not worked. Darcy scowled at his reflection as his valet straightened his cravat. And now, 2 weeks later, he was staying with Bingley and his sisters at his new estate in Hertfordshire. He had not anticipated being expected to attend an assembly so soon after arriving in the country, and his thoughts of the dreadful society of the night made him even more angry than he would normally be. His only excuse was that he was tired with a bone-wearying exhaustion caused by nightly dreams of a light-hearted, happy, and beautiful young woman whom he could no more banish from his thoughts than he could prevent himself dreaming of her. He nodded curtly at his valet, and the man scurried from the room. Darcy felt a little ashamed of himself. The man did not deserve his censure, but then Darcy did not deserve this night of tedium ahead. He sat at the writing desk. He had a few moments before he must face Miss Bingley. "My dear Georgiana, I hope you are well and that you continue to discover the delights of London with Mrs. Annesley. I do not plan to be in Hertfordshire very long, but if my plans change, I will of course send for you. I wanted to write and tell you that I am considering spending the winter at Pemberley instead of remaining in town, not the town. I wanted to write and tell you that I am considering spending the winter at Pemberley instead of remaining in town for the season. I begin to tire of all this society that others deem so necessary. However, if you wish to remain in town, then of course we will do that. I look forward to hearing from you as to your wishes. But now I must go downstairs and brave the attentions of Miss Bingley. Mr. Bingley has committed us all to the drudgery of an assembly in the nearby town of Meryton. You know how much I dislike such events, and this time, knowing so few people, I cannot but look on the evening with disgust. So I hope you are enjoying your time much more than I. Your loving brother, William." He sealed the letter and wrote the direction. Then, with a heavy sigh, he rose to his feet and made his way downstairs. Dropping the letter on the hall table to be sent in the morning, he bowed courteously to Miss Bingley and Mrs. Hurst. Mrs. Hurst, that's a much better name. He bowed courteously to Miss Bingley and Mrs. Hurst. "Good evening, Mrs. Hurst. Good evening, Miss Bingley. I trust you are prepared for the evening's entertainment." "Damn silly waiters." No, that's the wrong one. He's jowly. "Mr. Hurst, where are you?" "Mr. Hurst, Mr. Hurst, Mr. Hurst." From Bingley has, I think, what Bingley has told me, Mr. Stoke. Yes, so sort of there. "Damn silly way to spend an evening." Hurst was not a gentleman, despite his fine clothing. Darcy despised him. But Bingley's eldest sister had married him, and if he valued Bingley's friendship, he must also tolerate his family. At least Hurst spent most of his time shoveling food impolitely into his mouth or asleep on the sofa. Miss Bingley, by way of contrast, was incessantly around him. He suddenly realized he must be careful not to allow her to compromise him. Why, the sudden suspicion, he didn't know, but he stood back, keeping his face impassive, and allowed her brother to take her arm and lead her to the carriage. The noise from the assembly rooms was loud even in the street outside as they descended from the coach. Bingley was disgustingly cheerful, but then he enjoyed socializing and saw nothing but good humour in those around him. Darcy watched him as he cheerfully led the way into the hall. Was Bingley really happy in company, or was he just a good actor? Perhaps he himself should try rather harder to be civil. He frowned. But if he did that, Miss Bingley would then be encouraged further, and he wanted to see a different face before him, a laughing, dark-haired girl captivating him in a single glimpse. No, he pushed forward. He must be distracted from his thoughts. As the group entered the assembly rooms, all conversation stopped, and he was conscious of nothing but the avaricious stares of every matron in town. He sighed, and Miss Bingley crowded up close to him. "Right, where are you, Miss Bingley? I know you're hideous, but let's go and..." Miss Bingley. Oh, she uses her range. She's absolutely horrible, and she uses her range to be very cutting, yes. How perfectly dreadful, Mr. Darcy. I have no doubt that you regret Charles bringing us here this evening. He eyed the gathering. Indeed. But he stepped away from her over-familiar closeness. A cheerful-looking man, dressed in silken pantaloons more suited... ran out of breath again. A cheerful-looking man, dressed in silken pantaloons more suited to St. James's, came bustling up to them and greeted Bingley effusively. Bingley returned his greeting and turned to Darcy. "Darcy, may I present Sir William Lucas?" He turned back to the portly man, who was almost bouncing on his heels in enthusiasm. "Sir William, Mr. Darcy of Pemberley in Derbyshire." "Delighted," Darcy murmured, bowing politely. Right, let's go and see where Sir William is. I've got him. Is he under S for Sir? Sir William Lucas, there you are. Bingley, you are very welcome. Yes, Bingley. You are very welcome. Capital, capital. Sir William bowed in return. We have some very lovely dance partners who will delight you, sir. Come. And he led the party across the room. Darcy hung, not hang. Darcy hung back behind. Darcy hung back behind his friend as they were paraded across the room. "And let me introduce you to Mrs. Bennet and her daughters, Mr. Bingley." The self-important Sir William was puffed up with pride as he strutted over. "Mrs. Bennet has 5 of the loveliest daughters in the country. Oh," he tailed off as they reached his quarry. "Well, I can introduce you to the eldest Miss Bennet anyway." He made the introductions, and Darcy was amused to see Bingley's smitten. Bingley's smitten. He made the introductions, and Darcy was amused to see Bingley's smitten expression as he regarded the admittedly handsome Miss Bennet. "And you, sir?" Double check out. She's always the same, but make sure we've got... Mrs. Bennet, where are you? "Oh, yes, your ladyship. The grounds are very nice." "Oh, yes. Oh, yes." "And you, sir?" Mrs. Bennet's loud voice and common talk grated on him. "Are you fond of dancing, sir?" "I apologize, madam. I rarely dance." Darcy could barely wait to get away from her. Bingley had already claimed Miss Bennet for a dance, and Darcy moved back to the dubious safety of Miss Bingley and Mrs. Hurst. But he was put out when Hurst surprisingly took his wife to the dance floor. He studiously looked away from Miss Bingley, and was relieved when Sir William asked her for the honour of a dance. She was very reluctant, but could obviously think of no excuse, and was borne away. Mr. Darcy was finally able to prowl around the edge of the room, looking at the country people who laughed, drank, and danced. He felt very superior, and certainly in a dreadfully bad mood. All he wanted was to be in London and find the girl Elizabeth. He knew he could never find her without a great deal of good fortune, and his temper shortened as he faced that fact. "Darcy, I must have you dance." Bingley was beside him. "You are standing around in this stupid manner, and I cannot have it." "You must accept it." Darcy stared across the room at several young women engaged in raucous laughter, with a number of militia officers, as young and fresh-faced as the girls they were with. His lip curled. "Your sisters are engaged at present, and I will stand up with no other." "You are too proud, Darcy. The girls here are very pleasant." You are dancing with the only handsome lady in the room, Bingley. I pray you, go back and enjoy your evening. Darcy turned away from him. Darcy turned away from him and beckoned a servant, taking a drink from his tray. He heard his name being whispered around the room. 10,000 a year, a great estate in Derbyshire. He clenched his jaw. It was the same wherever he went. No one approached him for himself, only for his fortune. And the loudest and the worst of them was Mrs. Bennet. The woman was dreadful, appalling. He caught the eye of Miss Bingley. She knew, as well as he did, the necessity to stop her brother from falling for the undoubted beauty and whatever less obvious charms were possessed by Miss Bennet. He could not possibly be permitted to encumber himself with such relations. He continued to circle the room, trying to avoid the local people, and also Miss Bingley. It would be a long evening. Okay, I reckon we can get one more before I need a break. Okay. Chapter 9. Elizabeth, your uncle and I are becoming rather concerned about you. Aunt Gardiner was sipping her tea and trying not to look at her niece. They were sitting outside in the garden under the great old oak tree. Elizabeth knew what concerned aunt and uncle. She just did not know quite how to explain things to her aunt without divulging the existence of the diary, for she was quite sure they would take it away. That she could not bear. "I'm sorry if I have worried you, Aunt Gardiner," Elizabeth said. "I would not cause you any concern for all the world." "I know that, Lizzie." Her aunt was quick to reassure her. "But I am afraid that you're anxious about something and you do not feel able to tell me. I feel as if I have failed you, perhaps." "Oh, no!" Elizabeth was dismayed. You cannot. You cannot possibly ever do that, dear aunt." She put her hand on her aunt's arm. "I know you care very much for me, and I am very happy here." That much was a bit weird. "I know you care very much for me, and I am very happy here." She could not talk about the tall, dark man who stalked through her dreams at night and her thoughts during the day, but neither could she mention how close she felt to Flora as the girl married Mr. Darcy and was taken away from everything and every one she had ever known to that great estate far away in Derbyshire. That was a hell of a sentence. Here we go. She dragged her attention back to her aunt. "No, Aunt Gardiner, I am very happy. I know you feel that I am quiet and distracted, and I will admit to it, but it is the same as I have told you about, that I am not prepared for my future life." She shook her head. "I cannot even be sure that I will be able to support myself, and I am concerned as to who will provide for my mother and sisters." She idly kicked at a tuft of grass by the tree. "Mamma has a very small income, as you know, but we daughters will have only £1,000. The income from that will not be enough for us, even if we were to uh, pool. The income from that will not be enough for us, even if we were to pool all together for a household." Mrs. Gardiner sipped her tea. "But why does it concern you quite so much, Lizzie? You have known it for a long time, haven't you?" We've got some little vehicle in the background, which will be a tractor because they're the only things that come through. Off you go, Mr. Tractor. He's gone. "But why does it concern you quite so much, Lizzie? You have known it for a long time, haven't you?" She took a deep breath and put down her cup. She turned to face her niece and caught her hands in hers. "Lizzie, Your uncle and I were wondering, are you concerned more now because you detect any signs that your father may not live much longer? Are you worried as to the state of his health? Oh, no. I'm so sorry if you and uncle have been thinking that. Elizabeth hurried to reassure her aunt. My father is in excellent health. She smiled, thinking of him. He is very well, and I have no concerns about him. Aunt Gardiner didn't take an... Aunt Gardiner didn't take her attention away from Elizabeth. I am very pleased to hear it, and your uncle will be too when I tell him. But if that is the case, then what is it that has brought you to such concern? Elizabeth looked down. It is nothing for me to be secretive about, Aunt. I am sorry that I have not made it clear before. She gave her aunt a small smile. I remember telling you about my friend, Charlotte Lucas. She is 26 years old and is not married. Dear Jane is 22, and I believe her to be the most beautiful and amiable girl of our generation. Yet there are no gentlemen we know in the country who are in a position to court them. She shook her head. If neither of them can marry, then who am I to think some rich gentleman will... If neither of them can marry, then who am I to think such... come on. If neither of them can marry, then who am I to think some rich gentleman will pursue me? She shrugged a little helplessly. Jane and I have spent many hours discussing it and wondering what we shall do. Our sisters are even less able to support themselves. Our sisters are even less able to support themselves. Kitty and Lydia in particular have not a thought in their heads about their future. No. Our sisters are even less able to support themselves. Kitty and Lydia in particular have not a thought in their heads about the future. Her aunt looked at her lovingly. You must not worry so, Lizzie. If the worst happens, you know that you and Jane will always be welcome in our home, and your uncle will not see any of you without a home. She stopped and thought for a few minutes. Perhaps you and Jane should spend the season with us this year. I could somehow obtain vouchers to the Almack's balls, I am sure. There are very many eligible gentlemen. Almack's. I could somehow obtain vouchers to the Almack's balls, I am sure. There are very many eligible gentlemen who attend them. Dear Aunt Gardiner, Elizabeth smiled, you have such wonderful ideas. I am sure Jane will be pleased to spend the winter here, and I'm grateful to Uncle Gardiner that he will always be there for us. But I am determined that I should be able to make my own way if the situation ever warrants it be so. She reached out to embrace her aunt. So I am pleased to be here. I can study and try to improve my education, and also try to find a rich gentleman whom I can love, for I will not marry without love. Her declaration was heartfelt, and her aunt laughed at the determination in her niece's voice. And I am sure you will And I am sure you will insist he is clever. And I am sure you will insist he is clever, witty, and exceedingly handsome too. But of course, Elizabeth smiled widely, happy her aunt was able to lighten the conversation, although she did feel guilty that she was not able to divulge the extra reasons why she was so inattentive to her family. But the diary called her. Each day she needed to know what was happening to Flora and how her life was unfolding. She wished she could read it faster, but the writing was small, and the ink had faded a great deal. Reading long by candlelight strained Elizabeth's sight, and she was afraid of damaging her vision if she persisted once her eyes stung and watered. And that is time for a break. So I am going to go and take a break, have a cup of tea, go to the loo, do all those wonderful things that we all have to do as human beings. And I will have another session going on in about between half an hour and an hour or so. You are welcome to join me there, and we will go from there. So super cool. Any questions, stick them in the comments. I'm more than happy to answer them. See you in half an hour or so.